Special meeting of the Laconia City Council scheduled for 6 o'clock on June 26th, 2017. And the subject at hand tonight, an hour before our regular meeting, is to discuss the budget, deliberate on the budget. That's the only item on the agenda. So I would say going into tonight, by the way, it is the budget resolutions are on our agenda under unfinished business, but we're entering the meeting under the assumption that we will not take that up tonight. At the earliest, we will take it up at our first meeting in July.
I think the expectation that we would have uncertainties,
Mike.
thank you. The expectation that we'd have uncertainties with respect to the state budget, I think, led us to thinking that July made the most sense, because it was going to take to the end of the month for them to work through their various bills and provisions. And I'm not saying we need to do it tonight, but I think we'll probably have all the information at this juncture that we could want. I'm not trying to rush us. If we want to take another meeting, that's fine, but I'm just saying, I don't think there's any more new knowledge. It's whether you've digested it enough.
No new knowledge coming from the state.
Yeah.
But we may have changes we want to
Right,
make
sure.
in the budget.
No problem. I think that,
Okay, so the subject is general budget discussion on the part of the council. We have an hour, a little less now, to do this. And the floor is open to anyone who'd like to lead off. Councilor Bear.
Well, to begin with, I think it would be good if we just went around and everybody put out what their thoughts are instead of back and forth when, you know.
You want to start?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have no problems, you know, with the budget. Basically, it's a good budget. I still object to the school funding, but I wouldn't, I would vote for the budget for the simple reason everything else is very important as well. Having said that, I have two things I'd like to add to the budget, if possible. I would like to see the money in the capital outlay that Parks and Recs has for, it's the amount of $80,000, but I don't think we could possibly do it in two sections to take care of the erosion of the beaches for the local people, the four beaches, Opeechee Point, Opeechee Cove, Bartlett, and Bond Beach. Maybe we could do Bond Beach and Bartlett Beach, and then maybe, of course, that's not repairing them, it's basically a study and possibly what, engineering, I don't know. We have spent almost $400,000, or at least we've appropriated $400,000 for the Weirs Beach restoration. And I think it's only fair that the local people who pay the taxes are entitled to have their beaches restored as well. And it's basically a small amount of money. And instead of the 80, we could do 40 this year and maybe 40 next year. That's...
So you're referring to capital outlay where the Public
Beach.
Works Department requested $80,000
Yep,
for beach facility drainage improvement that was not recommended by the city manager.
right. It was also in the capital outlay request last year and was not approved. And it's just something that I would like to put out if, should I go on to the next, or do you want to debate the issue?
Well, let's get them out on the table.
All right. Number two, I'd like to add a police officer. I'm not sure how we're going to pay for this. However, we're all aware of the problems in the city, not only, with the drugs, but some of the police facts that were listed were everything has gone up as far as domestic violence, violation of protection orders, drug offenses, criminal mischief, auto theft, aggravated assault, and robbery. Now, and most all of those crimes are probably the result of the main one, the drug offense. The reason I'd like to see an officer added is for him to be a downtown patrolman. A lot of the residents that have moved in downtown basically moved there so that they could walk about the city and go to the downtown, within walking distance. I have had a lot of calls where they don't feel the safety, and we all know the problems that have been existing on Main Street. A patrolman not only gets rid of a lot of the troublemakers because the mere presence will deter them, it also gets the public that's out there familiar with that patrolman and he with them, also with the store owners. And perhaps the police would rather use them in another capacity. But this year, the police department not only level funded from last year, they were below last year's budget. They never exceed expectations. They never ask for more than they think they can get. But it has been noted in their report that a lot of things can't be controlled due to the fact they don't have the necessary manpower.
So you have a dollar figure in mind?
Well,
I just did the quick math on here.
Yep.
We have 30 patrolmen, the average salary is $54,000.
is that with
plus benefits and
plus
retirement.
benefits and retirement, yep,
So you're probably talking $100,000.
right.
Councilor Bear?
Whitman.
Just as a suggestion, it'd probably take some time to recruit and train, and maybe if you're a way to lower the impact and give us some time to build into it would be to do a half a year of that as opposed to
We've done it, before that way, it's possible,
Yep.
No, I wouldn't object to that. I only had a couple of questions. Can you give me the total one-time money this year? It's, about $1,200,000?
As it stands right now, we've
1.2.
got two properties that are, you talk about property that we're selling for one-time money?
Plus the Concord waste, didn't we get 200 and something thousand?
That was in the prior, that was in the budget we're working on right now. I'm sorry.
In our last meeting, you mentioned possibly supplementing the road budget with,
We have sale of two properties. One's slated to gross $508,000. The second one's slated to gross $475,000. Those are from sale of properties. We had $238,000 that were being returned. That is already accounted for with some of the small capital items within the budget. I think that 238 is targeted to go 100,000 to the non-capital reserve account, and a couple of the small capital items that you'll find on page 11, and they would include the police mobile data terminals and the police portable radios, and then the community center heating repairs. So that's the lion's share of that 238. We are getting some one-time street money in a legislative bill separate from the state budget that's coming back that I'm estimating probably for Laconia will be about $275,000, but that is an additional amount that's coming through the highway block grant, and it needs to be
That's
used.
for highway.
It needs to be used for roads, and we can't supplant it. So in essence,
Right.
we can't say, well, let's pull 275 out of the budget elsewhere and substitute this new money into its place.
So, but already 500,000 has been granted to the school contract.
Council has decided to earmark 500,000.
What are we talking about having anything, is there anything there to play with?
It's
It'd be
the
helpful if you walked through this whole thing, because I think that would get to what Councilor Bear was getting at. You discussed some of that in here.
okay. Would the council like me to go through the sheet?
go ahead.
It might help understand the revenue picture, which I think you're trying to get to, Councilor Bear.
Right.
So what you have before you is an overview of what happened through the state budget process to aid to municipalities. And basically, we're flat-funded on a couple of key items. The first one's rooms and meals. You can see the identical amount is coming in 18-19 as we get right now. The highway block grants are going up very slightly just with the volume of fuel being sold. As gas is cheaper, people are tending to drive more, but at the same time, as cars are getting more efficient and hybrids and electric vehicles are coming on, they're not buying gasoline, so there's a downside to it as well. So we're not expecting on the traditional highway block grants to get much more than we're getting right now listed in the budget book. Under fiscal year 18, that's the $30 million that's coming in one-time money. It's basically excess money that the state had in their budget after they funded some dollars into their rainy day account, and that $30 million will be distributed under the current formula, and that's the $275,000 that I think we'll get. But again, it needs to be used for streets, and we
For
can't
roads,
supplant.
right.
And that's one-time money only. It's not showing up again next year.
Can I ask a question on that item? if
Yeah.
you're- All right. So with respect to that, we could use it towards our road plan for the 2.5 million, right? The bond?
Use that towards debt service and free up a portion that was going to be targeted debt service. I think the debt service amount is only the half year's interest for year one, and I think we've got 30. Donna will pull up the number that we've got for the partial year interest on the bond, so I'll get that to you in a second. The municipal bridge aid is level funded at the current amount of the $6.8 million. The additional bridge aid is money that's going into that pot of state bridge aid programs, which is typically an 80% state share, a 20% local share. That's not going to do anything for us specifically
we're not
this
on the
year.
list.
It'll bump a couple of our projects maybe up a year or two because there's some more money going into it. The environmental grants aren't going to add anything new on either one, nor the flood control money.
No.
50,000.
So $50,000 is the partial year interest, so I think where Councilor Lippman is going, if we wanted to use some of the
Would
$275.
it not
that
come from unreserved, for the beaches, from the unreserved? That's land and buildings, basically. Beaches are land.
Non-capital reserve account you're talking
Yeah,
about?
the non-capital.
Could put the
Yes.
50,000 in the non-capital reserve.
Yep, there's about 50, and
I
we're
mean, have
slated
we
to have another
committed,
100.
have we committed a lot of that to something else?
No, we've netted out, so what you see in that balance, it's around 50,000. That is after
And
the...
we'll get an additional 100?
Another 100 would roll into it, and we've already netted out the cost of the City Hall window replacement, which we're going through the bids on now, and the cost of the wells over at Robbie Mills. So the 50,000 is sitting there, and if the 100,000 that's in the budget stays there, then there'll be 150 on the date that the budget's approved.
Gee, that
The
would
remainder
take
of
care
this sheet,
The beaches and the police.
the legislature did approve Keno as a way of funding
Yeah.
kindergarten. That will not kick in until fiscal year 19, and it's not the full amount of the adequacy as needed, or at least they're not anticipating it to be the full amount. But there will be some additional money coming to the schools next year at this time, but not for the budget we're working on. Since we haven't closed on the sale of the Lakeport Fire Station, I would ask you, when we move toward budget deliberation and adoption, that we add $475,000 into the miscellaneous revenues line item and add $475,000 into the contingency, which allows the council the full opportunity to assign that as they deem. The reason we didn't put it in the budget is we didn't know if we were going to be closing on the sale prior to July 1 fiscal year start, and if we did, we would have recognized it a different way. We still would have recognized it. So there's some money that, once that settles, will be there for the council to determine an appropriate use for.
Councilor Lippman.
I agree with what you just suggested, but just looking ahead a little bit at tonight's agenda, we're transferring, if I'm reading the agenda correctly, if I'm remembering it, something like $115,000 to cover a retirement above and beyond.
We had three large
Right.
retirements for three different
Right.
departments.
And
So yes.
what we've historically said is we try to do at least half of it from the
Correct.
current budget.
Yep.
And then we need to, I'm just saying that maybe, I would suggest we do what you did, but somewhere later in the year, if we're in pretty good shape budget-wise, I think try to replenish that
Oh, yeah,
fund.
I wasn't expecting the 475 or whatever to be
Right,
there to
right.
expend on recurring expenses. Is simply would give the council an opportunity to look at some of the smaller capital projects, priorities like staffing, looking to, bump up some of the reserve accounts if that's appropriate. All those options are available to you at any time during the next 12 months.
One last question. Can any of the carry-forward monies be used other than what they're designated for?
If the council chooses to...
They can go to the general fund or go to a specific,
They can.
They can?
I would, the ones that we carry forward are typically for purchases or outside contracts.
Yeah.
More of the one-time money items. So you could use them towards a recurring expense like a police officer position, but then that one-time money goes away, and then next budget, we've got to...
like we
fund
did
that
for the
first
fire
before-
department. We did it for 4 firemen, right?
I don't think we pulled money for staffing out of those types of reserve accounts. That was money that was saved within the fire budget that they put there in order to come back and help bridge the gap over a couple of years.
Has the,
I don't think the fire department paid for it.
while we're on this, what would I do without you?
I don't know.
Has the carry-forward predictions for at least the last 2 or 3 years been pretty accurate in terms of what we've needed
Typically, what will happen is we'll budget money for either outside services or projects, and in some cases, we aren't able to complete them in the fiscal year we're working on. So examples might be, we maybe don't expend the full street paving budget before June 30th ends because we've got some money that we want to carry forward to do fall projects, or guardrails or fences, or those types of things. So we've typically carried forward the capital or special purchase outside contract type of monies. What we don't typically carry forward is any money that remains in salary line items that has come in less than anticipated because of changeover in personnel, some of the benefit line items, any of the revenue that's coming above and beyond. That is all flowed into the general fund, the fund balance, because in the budget year we're wrapping up right now, we used $935,000 out of the fund balance to help lower taxes. And if we aren't able to replace that by money lapsing into it or excess revenues rolling into it, then our fund balance will drop significantly. So anything less than the 935, once we close the year, it means our fund balance has gone down a little bit. In this year's budget, knowing that revenue estimates are getting tighter and we're closer to hitting the mark and there's not a lot more upside, I've reduced the use of fund balance by $100,000 and dropped it to only using $835,000 this year because I'm looking in the future and don't see the likelihood of us necessarily returning close to $1 million every year. So I think we should start a gradual decrease, progression, if you will, of weaning ourselves from the fund balance until we see where things shake out over the next couple of years.
I agree.
Councilor Lippman?
I'd like you to finish this, then I think the rest of that page, and then I have a
Yeah.
question on
Sure.
the carry forwards.
So the 475 would basically go in and offset a revenue for an expense, and the council could allocate it later on during the year. The solid waste, as we know, as the Public Works Director mentioned last week, we need to reflect about $120,000 increase for the cost of the contract beginning October 1st. The full increase would be $160,000, but since we're starting the contract October 1, we're a quarter of the way through the year, we're looking for $120,000. So the two recommendations that I would have for you on how to offset that $120,000 expense that we were not anticipating is if we reduce the street repairs line item by $66,000, that puts us at the exact same amount that we used last year, which was $1,484,000. I know that's a little bit of an odd number, but the council transferred $16,000 out of the impact fees,
Impact fees.
and that's what rounded it to the $1,500,000. We've got $21,000 in the street impact fees as we stand today, so the council could certainly, if they chose,
same thing.
move the $16,000 out. That would get us the same buying power. And again, don't forget, we've got the bond that we're looking at for the $2.5 million, and we've got the $275,000 in additional street money. So we wouldn't really be taking any step backwards. We'd be taking steps forward still.
And that's, good. And that's where I think the carry forward on page I lost it here.
You in the budget book?
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
no,
the
in
agenda for
the
tonight?
agenda for tonight, there's a $780,000 carry forward for roads.
Right, and that's partly because when we budget the $1.5 million, part of it gets done in the spring construction season,
Right.
part of it gets done in the fall.
Right.
And that's why we need to carry it forward when the fiscal year ends.
So my,
It's not found money, it's
No.
just
No,
money
no,
that hasn't
yeah.
been spent yet.
so my fundamental question, though, is with the 780 of projects that to be done, the 1.5 million roughly that we're carrying in the budget, and the 2.5 million of borrowing, we're now up to like almost approaching 5 million in road construction in the next 12 months. Are we in
Well,
fact,
it'll be the next 18 months.
18
Yeah.
months.
18 months rather, do we feel comfortable we can can utilize that just based on engineering and timing and all the other
Yes.
things?
Yes,
Okay.
we can.
Okay, good. Okay.
So then the final piece of how to offset the 120,000 is I had asked our finance director, Donna Woodeman, to run a current revenue through this point in June, and we are at $2,675,000 in motor vehicle registration year-to-date. And if you look on page 4 of your budget book, under the license and permits heading, we've estimated $2,620,000 for the revenues next year. So we've already exceeded that for this year. And part of that $2,620,000 includes the additional $70,000 that we're going to be getting for the additional $3.50 per registration. So putting that aside, and we've got 5 business days, including today, we're clearly going to exceed $2.7 million in motor vehicle registrations this year, not even counting on the extra $70,000 that will come at an extra $3.50 a vehicle on the $20,000. So I think bumping that up by the $54,000 is still a conservative number. I would think next year we'd be looking at $2,750,000, but again, I'd rather leave a little cushion there and have a little excess flow. So that's how I would recommend that we fund the $120,000 that we need for the solid waste.
Okay.
Counselor Hamel?
That extra money, that extra 70,000, wasn't that dedicated to road repair?
Absolutely, yep. And
Okay.
that'll go into a separate standalone account. The whole $5 will show up in a separate standalone account.
Can that go, excuse me, can that go towards the bond payment?
Can, yep.
Okay.
But we've counted that revenue, so you could certainly go towards the bond or whatever. That money is built into this budget. And it's basically,
And where, is that going to be dedicated? We were going to make a line item for that, I thought.
we will. Once we set it up for July 1, we'll be putting it into its own line item, so you'll see the balance. And that can be really used for any transportation. It could be
Vehicles?
roads, bridges, sidewalks.
Does it have to be pavement, or can it be used to buy a public works vehicle that's?
No,
Or is that just
yeah.
repairs?
Or projects, construction. So it could be sidewalks, could be,
Yep.
bridge work, could be road work, anything to do with a type of transportation, a mode of transportation that someone may
Okay.
use.
I guess I'd like to support the idea of both ideas that Council Bears put on the table on putting some money into our local beaches, the 50,000 from the non-capital reserve fund. I think we have the space to do that, and I think just in general, in terms of repositioning ourselves with the WOW Trail advancement that we got this year, the build-out of the Riverwalk, I think the chance to sort of boast our amenities,
Bartlett Beach.
Bartlett Beach,
Yeah.
I think this is a good time to sort of leverage other things that are going on. And with respect to the police situation, I guess I'd suggest that we look at that as a half-year thing, and also to give the police chief and commission time to make a formal proposal. But I think, looking at some of the issues that they're challenged with, they probably could use some depth. And if they don't have a legitimate proposal, we don't have to necessarily fund it. Can we put that in like a contingency and based on a plan acceptable to the council? And we could take that 50,000 from the amount that you talked about us putting in contingency,
From the sale of the property.
sale of the property.
Wait a minute, we're going to take one-time money from,
Hear me out, okay? In terms of the, we could do one of two things. We can, I think we can build into that additional money. I'm just saying to sort of fund the first year of it, take it from one-time money. I think there's enough room for us to grow into that position.
I don't, I'm not disagreeing with that approach, but that counts on factors that we really can't predict at this point in time for next year. I mean, and I keep being aware that every year, at least that I've been here, and I know that you've solved this problem time and again, but every year we look at ways to fit under the tax cap. I'm not going to get into a tax cap debate, but I just want to make sure that what we're funding with one-time money, which really it is, in terms of an extra police officer, isn't going to be a problem next year when we're looking at the budget.
I guess, from my standpoint, we can not take it from that contingency fund. I'm sure if we needed to find $50,000 in the existing budget without taking it from the contingency fund, if that makes everybody more comfortable, I'm sure we can overwork over the
Right.
course of the year to free up $50,000 over the next 6 months based on things that are going to happen here or not happen.
I just question to both of you,
Yep.
the will of the council is the will of the council. Why in the world, given the issues we face with pension requirements and whatnot, we would be adding a position to the city payroll on a permanent basis that we have to pay a 30% tax on? And that's just insanity to me.
Well, but I don't think that...
They haven't even asked for it.
Well, I think that both Councilor Beer and I have had private conversations with police folks, and that's, I guess, some sense that if we ask them to manage without it, they'll manage without it, I guess, in terms of trying to bring, I think what Councilor Beer is trying to get at is to try to bring some improvement to the policing in the downtown area, particularly as we're trying to bring that back to life with things that are going on. I think that's where you're coming from.
This is from the Police Commission in their report. As a commission, we've worked closely with the chief and his staff to identify gaps in service, areas where it's become clear that additional resources and methods must be implemented to address these needs. And they've always gone along because they,
What page are you on?
well, the police report, page 3.
And it asks in there for an additional police officer downtown?
They haven't directly asked, they've told us in their general appeal that they've recognized, and they have, of how important it is to the city for level funding. But at the same time, they're showing us that they do need additional forces. But
So does the fire department. They want 16 more or whatever.
well, we just
what-
gave them 4.
They don't,
Anyway, I'll shut up. Counselor Hamel.
A few things. On page 1, Scott, between the 17 and 18 budgets and what you approved, I noticed between fire and police, there's a total increase in their budgets of nearly $400,000, $398 if you add those together. Public Works has a decrease of 105. Just solid waste increases, library planning decreases, records increase, elections decrease, welfare decrease by 9. What's the, could you tell me what's the overriding thing on the fire and the police, is it the pension thing, or, I mean, for it to increase by $400,000, just on two budgets, which basically are our biggest budgets, really, but...
It is. It's directly tied to the pension. Both of those departments in Group 2 saw a double-digit increase in their retirement system contribution, and it's a reflection or calculation, if you will, of payroll. So as payroll increases and you're going up a double-digit increase on the amount that needs to be contributed on the entire payroll, that's what's driving it. So just remember, within police, fire, and public works, all of their benefits, retirement, health insurance, show up within those budgets. So sometimes if you're looking at planning or finance or administration, all of those components are in a separate account. So when the cost of health insurance, we know, is up 4%, that's reflected in the police and the fire budget and public works budget. When retirement for police and fire goes up double-digit, that's reflected. For all other departments collectively, all of those benefits show up in a finance page. They're not in each individual budget. So it can be a little bit distorted just for that particular reason. But the big driver is the retirement system cost for the Group 2 police and fire. For the other municipal employees, it was basically a little bit above inflation. It was a little over 2%, I believe, was the number, so the impact was much more manageable.
Okay, so those two departments basically, actually, I'm going to round it up to 400, because it's only
It's 403.
$1,000, how much?
It's 403, the
Yeah.
those two.
Okay.
167 for the police, and 165.
Yeah. So those two departments there basically ate the whole tax cap plus 100,000, because we got roughly 300,000 from the tax cap. And the school got 5, so we got 8 in all.
The city was allowed to expend
3-something.
148, so 358.
Yeah, okay.
And plus, the county was level funded, so the city actually was able to utilize the county amount as well, which is about $54,000. So the city increased just under the tax cap allowance by about that $400,000. And then as motor vehicle registrations went up in
Yep.
in the one-time money from the
That could still
return of the
change,
co-op.
too, by the way.
Pardon me?
That county assessment could
Oh,
still
yeah.
change by the time we pay the bill.
It very
the
well
supplemental
could.
appropriation passes,
we had to
Yeah.
go
We'll
over
pay
what we got.
20% of that.
Yep.
Okay, so,
Contingency.
okay. So I'll put what I'd like to do on the table for the council's thoughts. So there's roughly 52,000 in non-capital now. You're going to add 100, so there's 150. So we're going to take 500 from the sale of the two properties, put it in the school fund there. So there's roughly 500 left for something.
Yeah, we've got to net out some expenses that we've had, so call
Say
it 400.
400, okay. And that was going to go into contingency?
Just a holding slot for the council to make determinations about.
Okay. What I would like to see, or, it isn't just me, I mean, the whole council, is to add another 100 to that, from that, to bring it up to 250.
A hundred
unreserved
from the
account.
400 to the non-cap reserve?
Yep. And I agree with Brenda and Henry about the beaches. I'd like to see 40,000 of that spent there. There's one of the things that wasn't done, and it's kind of way down the list, but it's kind of right in plain view, is the, where is it? The O-Pee-Chee Park fence improvement. That was priced out at $35,000. And then the other thing was the basketball courts at Tardif and Sanborn, which was priced out at $25,000. So if we add those three up, that would be $100,000 to do those. And most of the-
100,000 for beaches, O-Pee-Chee fence, and basketball courts.
Correct, yep. And these are, these are items we can pick at that are very low on the CIP standings. I mean, the basketball courts are 48th, so they'll never rise to the top 10 that, usually the manager picks. the fencing is 42,
I think
and the, well, the drainage, it isn't even listed. I guess that was,
It's listed at 80.
huh?
It's
It
listed
was
at
done
80.
at 80 for 4, but if we did it
Yeah.
in half,
Correct.
40.
So, those are some of the capital things that I'd like to see
It complements the amenity
thought,
aspects of it.
yeah. You know, I mean, look what we did at O-Pee-Chee and all that, and when you drive by, you see a dilapidated fence. I mean, it doesn't have to be done, but if we can, that would be nice.
So if I got this right, as far as list compilation is concerned, you'd like to see 40,000 going to the beaches, 35,000 to a peachy fence, and 25,000 basketball courts.
Yes, and there's
correct?
2 of them, yep. Kind of like what we did with the Levitt Park Tennis Court.
Yeah.
25 total,
Total.
Total, yeah.
That's what we were told, so that's what I'm going by.
okay?
Okay.
Anything else?
Yep. Also, I would like to see us within the next year, not this year's budget, obviously, but next year's budget, start looking at the Public Works Department and their pay scale. I think they're, for the most part, underpaid. We've been bolstering a lot of the other departments pretty heavily, and I just think that it's time for us to take a look at, what wages they get comparable to maybe other towns or whatever, since that's what we
Oh, that's all part of union negotiations. right?
understand that. But we can, if we say we want to add something, we can do that, can't we?
Sure. It's got to be negotiated, but I'm sure if you're off.
Sure they won't turn it down.
They won't say no, I don't think.
Well, we might
But
get something.
I just,
It might not be a
uh,
good negotiating stance at the start, but it's,
yeah.
Well, they might give something back.
But, I just think it's time to take a look at how we're doing there comparable to other places. I mean, we compare everything else. We compare police, we compare fire, so I think it's time we
Schools.
take a look at their schools. So, just time to take a look at them.
So if I can just respond briefly, I have no problem with any of those suggestions, recommendations, if there's support on the council. I'm just thinking until that property closes and it
Exactly.
hits.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
this is,
I would just let it kind of sit there.
it is.
It will move into contingency if and when it closes, and then as quickly as the next meeting, you can have a resolution to transfer it out to either the specific
there'll be
projects or the
smoke coming from
non-capital
pockets
reserve.
all over the table.
Now, the other thing I have is, where is it? Under Fire Department,
Page what?
page 57.
57?
Yep. At the presentation by the chief, Ken Erickson, I asked a question about the overtime budget, and there's an increase of $40,000 there, give or take. I don't know the exact amount, but I added it up to 40. So what I would suggest is removing that $40,000 increase, and we can put that in the contingency fund.
So not lowering the budget, but
Not lowering the budget at all. Nope, just moving it.
From fire to contingency?
Yep. Or if you want to use it for the beaches,
Yeah, he'd be mad at me.
We've done something like that previously, that the manager can come back to us and based on need,
Yep.
can claim that money for the fire department, right?
We have, and we've used it every time we've done it, and just with wages going up and the retirement and just the actual obligation we have for our employees to, honor contracts with vacation pay and holiday pay and those types of things, I can tell you that without a doubt, that 40,000 I will be requesting to bring it back into that line item, into that budget.
well, but the discretionary part of it there is there's nothing in the union agreement or anything else that requires 9 people be on staff 24/7.
That is correct, and many times we don't run with 9, we're running at 8.
Well, what's your definition of many times?
I can get you the exact number of shifts a year that we do that.
I mean, the other day, for example, when the chief was here, he mentioned that Guilford is going to add another person to the day shift, but not the night shift, so they're going to run 4 and 3. We run 9 and 9 most of the time. There's, we could run 9 and 8, and that would eliminate a lot of overtime.
We do run the 8 more often. I can get you the numbers. Whenever we run down, it's typically at nighttime, because that tends to be a little bit quieter on the ambulance time. But there's a significant number of days, typically in the fall and the spring, where we are running at 8 right now.
I was looking at, the overtime for last year, and we hired 4 more people, which supposedly would help reduce it some, but it's actually, and I don't have the updated thing, because it's not in this month's, I don't know why, the overtime sheet. I haven't had it in the last 2 meetings.
It's typically in your financial and operational trends, which would have
It's
been,
not there.
tonight's the projects update. 2 weeks ago, you would have had the financial and operational trends.
I think I looked 2 weeks ago, but I didn't see it. I could be wrong.
We can get you a copy of it, I'm pretty sure.
But anyway,
it's there.
last I looked, I think there were, between fire and ambulance, I know it was over $200,000 over last year. So I know the hospital picks up part of it, but that could be part of the problem we're in now with
Speaking
that.
of the hospital, are we confident there's not going to be the need for an adjustment there?
I'm very comfortable. We're trying to get something a little bit more firmed up in writing today, but I know the hospital CEO has been out of town for a couple of days, and it was challenging to try to get something for tonight. But based on conversations we had, I'm comfortable to say that there will not be any additional impact to the city budgetary-wise in this budget.
In this budget.
This budget.
Well, that's good news.
All right, who's next?
I will.
Eva.
It's interesting because I had also thought the beach facilities, the drainage program needed to be looked at. Quite honestly, it's, I know if you get enough short monies, it eventually ends up being big money, but it's a small amount for any one year. The 40,000 is a perfect solution. The thing that struck me that I really wanted to see done, though, is the pedestrian walk through O-Pee-Chee Park. I know it's a really small thing, but if you're not familiar with those fields and you try to navigate when there are games going on, it's impossible to know where to walk with all the people there.
I was going to bring it up, but I didn't want to push my luck.
Well, I just, it's ironic that we all kind of picked this particular area to be
Yeah,
looking at,
amenities
but...
for the
That's
local.
20,000.
Yeah, 20,000. I mean, I did it one time, there was a meeting at the middle school, and I parked at O-Pee-Chee parking lot because I thought it'd be easier to get in and out of the school. And once nighttime hit, it was hard to find my way back, not being familiar with it. So, I think it's a small amount of money. And I think it would, those three, the things that we're looking at with the fencing and the pedestrian walk and the drainage improvements, I think would just finish off that area. Be a huge hit.
So you're endorsing the beaches idea,
Yep,
the
Fencing
walkway and the fencing?
yes, sir.
Okay. Anything else?
Where would this walkway go that you're talking about?
It'll go along the Little League fence from where the school gets out on the back side of the backstops.
Between the track, between the fence that goes around Smith Track and the playing fields on O-Pee-Chee Park, that space there.
Because the Parks Department's looking to put a walkway
So it
through.
would connect the school parking lot
That's it.
to the O-Pee-Chee Park parking lot.
That's the one that you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
Yep, that's the one I'm talking about, yep. That's it.
Or,
I'm happy with everything else.
Counselor Bounds?
I'm going to pass right now.
You're going to pass.
Going to pass.
Good.
Counselor Bounds is speechless.
He didn't say that.
Would you note that for the record, please, or?
And I was-
Counselor Bullock?
I don't think I've got anything to add or subtract. I think that I depend an awful lot on the committee that's assigned to that, and I agree with what they're doing.
You need to use your mic there, please.
I agree with what was proposed here tonight by that committee, and also that walking path at O-Pee-Chee now that I know where it is, because I know Kevin Dunleavy has spoken to it before, and that's why he was talking about putting it, so that'll be good. Yep.
All right, so we've got about 10 minutes left. So what I'd like to do, well, first of all, anybody else got something they want to throw out on the table for now? What I'd like to do is take a series of quick straw polls and to see if there's majority support at this point in time. It doesn't have to be isn't a final vote. Majority support for each of the things that's been mentioned here. If there is, then we would ask the city manager to incorporate those changes into the budget resolutions and whatnot with a cover sheet explaining what changes have been made, and that can be brought back to us at the next meeting. Okay? So is there anything else anybody wants to throw out on the table here at this point?
The only other, the other thing is, I'm not so sure supporting the policeman right now. I wouldn't mind having the city manager look in to see what could be done, but I think for this budget, I don't know if I could support it, but we could look to see for the following budget, what we could do with that, as far as adding another one. Just my thought.
Just a low.
So what I was suggesting is to put the amount that Councilor Bear had suggested as an item of contingency, and that, if ask the police chief and the commission to come back to us. If it wasn't something we felt comfortable with, we could postpone it, as you had suggested, or if it was something we felt was really valuable to us, we could go forward with it, that we had it covered. That's...
Well, it's kind of hard to say that it's not valuable.
Well, I meant,
But, I just think where we are on the budget right now, to add another position would make it hard, where we've already, the city manager and Don has already made all the cuts that they had to cut to get to where we are. I would rather see it, if we decide for a round next year, is to work it into the budget right off the bat, and figure it that way, instead of trying to add a position at this point. But that's just my thought.
We may not be here next
We
year.
may not be here.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Just
we
as-
are.
Well, and something, I'm going to be very cautious of my words here, but something I want to put on the table, because it's sort of the elephant in the room, to be trite, from a budgeting standpoint in out years, is the Colonial Theater. And we all know we've had issues with that, and those issues are, as of this moment, unresolved. We had a meeting last week, we have another meeting this week, and I'm very hopeful that within 2 weeks, the city manager and I will be able to come back to the council with a report on where that project is likely going. But what I can say tonight is that in order for that project to succeed, it is very, very likely that the city is going to have to increase its financial contribution. And that's going to hit us in the out years. So when we're we're not necessarily looking at anything additional for this budget because the project's been delayed so long. But once it opens, it's very likely going to require, in order for it to happen, is very likely going to require a bigger contribution on the city's part, or to make it happen at all. And that's about all I can say at this point in time. So that's going to be, if that's going to happen, that's going to be, it's going to hit the books the following year and years after.
And also, Mayor, the other thing, too, is something that could be coming up in the future, is sitting right over there. It's parking garage. The owner is still there. It's not going away, so, that's something.
See what happens with that.
We're going to need to look at that.
I want to be, I want to be cautious about this budget, because I think there are too many unpredictable factors that are unresolved at this time. So for the capital outlay for the beaches, and and the capital outlay for the pedestrian walk. I think those are all good investments. They'll enhance the city, they'll enhance the attractiveness of it, and for that amount of money, which I'm not making de minimis of, but, you know, for a $40,000 investment this year for beach facilities, drainage, and studies, that's worth it. If we look at much more, it's not that I don't want an extra officer, I just don't want it funded in this budget, because it's a long-term commitment, and we don't know where we're going to go with it. In terms of Bob's suggestion of yanking out 40,000, I shouldn't use that word, of taking out $40,000 from the fire department budget, I'd like to see the numbers that the manager has indicated he wants to get to us with respect to the shift differential and how they handle it, because it's not that I think that there's anything wrong about it, but we spend an awful lot of money on overtime, just an awful lot of money on overtime, and I'd like to try to get that number down, however we can do it, and I'm not suggesting this is the time to do it and just say, you know, here's your ultimatum, you get $500,000 in overtime this year and not $800,000 or whatever the final number is. But that's my thought on that. We need to be cautious in terms of, I'll be done in a minute. We need to be cautious in terms of where we're getting the money, you know? We got a $400,000 tax cap that the manager has been just short of brilliant in figuring out how we're going to meet that tax cap in this fiscal year. And I'm going to keep my mouth quiet about the tax cap, because this is not the time to debate it, but so that's just my general overview. The small expenditures that we're looking at, I call them small, I know they're not small, but, you know, putting aside $100,000 to do those projects and attract the beaches and the parks is a good investment, so.
Counselor Littman.
So I think that the information that you introduced about some uncertainty around that, but I guess we have, I think we should take in the information that you have, and I think we should get a little bit of understanding of maybe a couple other items, but I think what Councilor Bear would support and what I'd support is we just put it in, we're putting the fire service money in contingency. If it's called upon, it's there. If we feel after hearing some additional information that we're not ready to go forward with that police position, I think we have we have months of time to evaluate that. And so I think we can have in our budget the contingency for the overtime and the fire department. I think we could have a contingency with the understanding that there may be a lot more information coming out on a topic that, you know, I'm just hearing about, so.
Well, I'm not opposed to that, because we can have the discussion about another police officer and what the value of this, or putting them on half-time and what the impact is. We can have the discussion about the overtime, and so I'm not opposed to reserving the money for potential uses with respect to this. As long as we understand that when we put the money in contingency, there are other options that we're still going to have on the table about what we can do with that money.
Well, I mean, I think the contingency in and around filling back up the retirement, the excess retirement number is an important thing to do, because that's an unfunded liability. You know, we've only funded probably about 30 or 40% of the ultimate long-term amount, so the expectation is that we're going to have to continue to replenish that over time. So I think
Go ahead.
I'm done.
Is there an appropriate place on tonight's regular agenda where we could rejoin this conversation?
Sure, we could just add it to new business and continue the discussion.
All right, I'm going to recommend we do that so we can take a couple minutes break here before we start the meeting. So we'll take our informal straw polls here during the regular meeting at the end of new business.
Okay.
Okay? And so without, in lieu of any objection, I'll declare this meeting adjourned at 6:56 PM.